Welcome, everyone. Today we are going to be discussing blended learning and how it can be used at a medical school. First, just a couple of reminders. Please make sure you have run the audio setup wizard. You can find that up at the top. It's the microphone with the red starburst on it, up above the talk and video selections. And now, before we start, I want to make sure everyone's doors are shut and phones are turned off. This goes for the virtual listeners as well. I want to make sure you are ready to give your full attention to this workshop. Now we're going to do our quality check. For those listening live, can you see the red record button in the upper right-hand corner? If so, I would like you to give me a green check mark. You can find that in the four little icons on the participation list. It's the last one to the right. So if you could just give me a green check. Okay. Everybody can see that, so I'm going to go ahead and clear that out. And then if you can see the words quality check up at the top, give me a green check mark for that as well. Okay, great. And lastly, I want you to give me a green check mark if you can hear me adequately. I want to make sure that the virtual listeners can hear and see everything if they watch this later. So, okay, and everyone can hear me. So I'm going to clear that out, and we are going to get started. Like I said earlier, today we are going to be discussing blended learning and how it can be used at a medical school. For the virtual listeners out there, today is February 8th, 2015. And by the end of this workshop, you should be able to compare active and passive learning, determine a quality online learning activity, and discuss blended learning and how it can be used at a medical school. Okay, have any of you ever witnessed active learning? For those of you that are not familiar with active learning, this would mean where students are actively discussing the topics in class, working together to find a solution, or explaining a topic that a classmate doesn't understand. We do this nearly every day at the School of Medicine. Our students sit in groups, engage in discussion, take quizzes as a team, and various other activities that we label as active or engaged learning. Now first, let's discuss the difference between active and passive learning. Active learning is where students are engaged in activities during class. This typically requires them to come to class with some kind of background knowledge about the topic so they can apply that knowledge during the activities. Passive learning would be the typical large lecture hall with the professor at the front lecturing from a PowerPoint with little to no interaction with the students. Active learning requires the student to come prepared with background knowledge, which means less face-to-face lecture time between the teacher and the student. Since active learning requires them to come prepared for the activities, they have to do more things online or out of class to be prepared for those activities that they're going to do during the class time. This is where blended learning would come into play. According to Garrison, blended learning is the organic integration of thoughtfully selected and complementary face-to-face and online approaches to technology. If your students are required to learn outside of class to be prepared for the in-class activity, the outside activities need to meet the educational purpose of that class. The best way to think about blended learning is to think of it as the opportunity to replace this passive learning lectures with collaborative and reflective learning activities like cases or projects. The face-to-face time will be spent then collaborating and interacting between facilitator and student. Okay, have any of you ever been in a class that used blended learning? Please use the green check for yes and the red X for no. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and clear that out. Looks like neither of you have ever experienced blended learning. I think most of you haven't been in a classroom setting in quite some time. This is a newer development. Um, is that correct? If so, you can give me a thumbs up, which is under the emoticon. It's a little smiley face up by the check mark boxes, the one on the far left. Okay, and Lauren gave me a thumbs up, and so did Gail. Okay, so let's discuss this a little bit further. Okay, by adding online lectures to a course, you lose that face-to-face lecture time, and not all faculty members like that. But you cannot add online lectures and continue to do the face-to-face lecturing as well. You need to, take those out of the classroom and use that time to apply the knowledge that the students are already supposed to be learning. And each faculty member will need to find their own balance when doing this. According to the 2014 Inside Higher Ed survey, many faculty believe online lectures are of lower quality than in-person lectures, and they feel they lack interaction with students. Even though we know most um, lectures that you would have in a lecture hall with a PowerPoint do not have a lot of interaction between teacher and student. This is why when we do the in-class activities, you need to make sure that the teachers and students are interacting and collaborating together to meet those learning objectives for that activity. Okay. Um, Adding PowerPoints to read or optional videos for the students to watch will not work for these activities. These should be a meaningful and robust activity. When you think of the online lectures or the online activities they do, you want them to be interactive and require the students to maybe have oral communication like a course like this, or written communication where they would maybe do a self-reflection or a self-assessment after the activity and show that they are, you know, understanding what they were supposed to get out of it, the objectives. Okay. Which of the following is the best explanation of an online learning activity? Would it be a PowerPoint presentation for the students to review, an online lecture with features like self-assessment and self-reflections, a link to a YouTube video that the students should watch if they have time, or a reading assignment from the textbook? What I would like you to do is go to your tools on the left-hand side of the whiteboard. You will see two boxes. There's one that's filled in and one that is open. If you click on the open box, you'll be able to draw a square around the one that you think is best. Okay, great. We've got one. Like, be sure you click on the open square. I can see there's dots coming in, so you've got something. So click down on it, and then you may have to, it'll give you the option of the square or the circle, and click on the square again. And then it's going to show the color options and things. Another little window will pop up, and you should be able to draw from there. There we go. Good job. Okay, and that is the correct answer. So good job for both of you. And now I'm going to clear this out, and we will go on to the next. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the School of Medicine does a lot of active learning already. We are gradually moving away from the traditional lecture and spending our in-class time solving case studies, doing activities, and applying the knowledge that the students have already gained from the out-of-class activities. We are also very technology driven. Our students take exams on iPads. We suggest digital copies of textbooks and references. Many of our third and fourth year students carry iPads or tablets in their white coats instead of reference books. And like I said, more time is being spent discussing patient cases and developing treatment plans instead of listening to a faculty member talk about these things. One of the classes I know very well because I used to coordinate it, and this year they moved away from in class lectures and a little bit of out of class reading and then a few days of active learning to only a handful of actually in class lectures because the majority of the time was spent doing case studies in class, and then the out of class time, which they got 1 day off a week to do online lectures and any of the textbook readings they needed as supplemental materials. And so then during that class time that they had, they were given a case study, and this case study progressed throughout the entire 3 week course. And so they built upon it, and they were able to develop treatment plans for this patient. After hearing about this move towards blended learning and less face to face lecture time, do you think it will be successful? I would like you to go to the chat box on the lower left and let me know your thoughts about blended learning. A couple of things to think about. Do you think the students will like it? Do you think the faculty will resist it? You don't have to write a lot, just tell me briefly what you think. Okay, so Lauren thinks it'll be more beneficial to the students, but it'll be a big change for some of the teachers. And that is the biggest issue with it. And Gail thinks it'll help students as well. The students, there is some pushback from students on some of this that I've seen in the School of Medicine. Nobody likes change, so they do kind of push back, but I think they do see how much more they're getting out of it because they can see themselves understanding and actually applying what they should know. And some of the faculty do push back and they don't, they have to change the way they've taught for many years. So it is a lot of work initially, but I think the payoff is great in this situation. Okay, so our society is very technology driven. When you look at a classroom that is strictly, a man or woman standing in front of the class delivering the words that are displayed on the screen in front of hundreds of students, you shouldn't be surprised to see the students completely zoned out or maybe using some of that technology we talked about, iPads, cell phones, things of that nature, as a distraction. Why not try blended learning, having the students do some online lectures, come to class prepared, and use that time to actually apply the knowledge. Get your students engaged in the activities, and I think they will get on board with what you're doing. Garrison says that education is about community, discourse, and reflection. Collaborative instructional designs using the emerging communication technologies are our future. Okay, and I mentioned Garrison a couple of times and the 2014 Higher Ed Survey, and so here are the references for both of those. I thank you all for coming today, and for the virtual listeners out there, this will be available for you shortly to review. So thank you, and everyone have a good day.